Welcome to today's deep dive. We are really glad you're here with us
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for tuning in.
because we know exactly why you're here today. You're someone who, well, you love to learn. You want the most impactful insights without having to wade through just a mountain of information to find them.
Right, you want the good stuff.
Exactly. And today we have a really special mission for you. We are unpacking a stack of notes, some excerpts, and research centered around, honestly, one of the most defining books on human behavior in recent years.
Oh, for sure. It's completely shifted the paradigm.
It really has. We're talking about James Clear's bestseller, Atomic Habits.
Yes.
Specifically, though, we are zooming in on a single section,
Chapter 7.
Chapter 7, yeah, which completely reshapes how we think about self-control, about discipline, and, frankly, why we fail.
Hmm?
Because, I mean, we all know the classic narrative, right?
We've all lived it.
Right. You swear off junk food on a Sunday night. You're feeling incredibly motivated. You tell yourself this week is different.
And then Tuesday rolls around.
Exactly. By Tuesday afternoon, you find yourself just staring at the bottom of a bag of chips. Or maybe, you tell yourself that finally starting that side project is a massive priority.
But you're consistently on the couch instead.
Always on the couch. We all know relying on sheer willpower rarely works out in the long run. But today, we're looking at notes that prove exactly why relying on discipline isn't just difficult, it is biologically backward.
It really is.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because to really understand why our habits hold us hostage, we have to look at the cultural baggage we carry around them. Society just loves to treat bad habits as a moral failing.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge stigma.
Yeah. If you're overweight, if you smoke, if you procrastinate, the overarching narrative pushed on you is just that you are weak. You lack discipline.
It is a pervasive and, frankly, a very damaging myth. We elevate this idea of heroic willpower to this almost mythological status.
Right, like it's a superpower.
Exactly. We assume that the people who stick to perfect diets, or the people who manage to write a novel in a month, or the ones who just never miss a single day at the gym, we assume they possess some kind of superhuman internal strength that the rest of us simply lack.
That they're just built differently.
Yeah, we look at them and think they have a deeper reservoir of moral fortitude. But the research from the sources we're looking at today paints a vastly different picture. The science shows that discipline is actually largely an illusion.
See, I hear this, but honestly, part of me pushes back on that right out of the gate.
Sure, that's a normal reaction.
Because if we just blame the environment for everything, aren't we letting ourselves off the hook a little too easily?
I get what you're saying.
It just feels like a really convenient excuse to say, well, my environment made me eat the donut, or my environment made me skip the gym. Doesn't internal discipline have to play a significant role at some point?
Yeah, that is the natural reaction most of us have, mostly because we've been conditioned to think exactly that way. But to understand why the environment really is the dominant force here, we need to look at a pivotal piece of research from the 1970s involving the Vietnam War.
Okay, the Vietnam study, this one is wild.
It is. It's a study that absolutely shocked the psychological community. So, during the war, heroin use was a massive problem among U.S. service members stationed overseas.
Understandably, given the stress.
Right. So researchers, specifically a scientist named Lee Robbins, were tasked with looking into this. And the numbers they found were terrifying. Roughly 35% of service members in Vietnam had tried heroin.
Wow, over a third.
Yeah. And around 20% were actively addicted to it.
20% actively addicted.
Yeah.
That is 1 in 5 soldiers in an active war zone. You can see why the government was absolutely panicking.
It was treated as a full-blown crisis, and rightfully so. The expectation in Washington, and this was based on everything we traditionally believe about the sticky nature of addiction and the necessity of willpower, the expectation was that these soldiers would return to the United States, and the country would just instantly be flooded with a massive wave of severe, long-term addiction cases.
Because in a typical civilian context, the narrative of rehab is incredibly grim.
Extremely. Someone goes to a clinical rehab facility, they get clean, they detox their system. But the moment they are discharged and go back home, the relapse rates are astronomical.
Right, because the data suggests that roughly 90% of heroin users become re-addicted once they return from rehab.
90%.
Because they're going right back to the neighborhood where their dealer lives. They're returning to the same living room where they used to get high. Hanging out with the exact same friend.
Exactly. The chemical is out of their body, but the world around them hasn't changed one bit.
So the cues are all still there.
Yes. But the Vietnam study showed the exact opposite outcome. When these soldiers came home from Vietnam to the United States, only about 5% became re-addicted within a year.
5%, down from 90.
And over an extended 3-year period, only 12% relapsed.
That is staggering.
Think about the magnitude of that shift. Nearly 9 out of 10 soldiers eliminated a severe heroin addiction almost overnight. What's fascinating here is that conventional wisdom completely failed to predict this. The scientists realized that addiction, and by extension our daily habits, isn't primarily a matter of internal moral fortitude.
It's about context.
Yes. The Vietnam soldiers experienced a massive, permanent environment shift. They left the intense, life-threatening stress, the specific peers they were using with, the geographical cues of the war zone, and they returned home to a completely different context in America where those specific triggers simply did not exist.
So the craving essentially disappeared because the environment that constantly triggered the craving disappeared, the context changed, so the behavior changed. And this leads to this massive aha moment for you listening right now. When scientists analyze people who seem to have tremendous self-control, they find out those individuals are not fundamentally different from those who are struggling.
Not at all.
They don't have a magical reserve of willpower. They just structure their lives in a way that does not require heroic willpower and self-control. They simply spend less time in tempting situations.
That's the secret.
The people with the best self-control are the ones who need to use it the least.
Precisely. It is infinitely easier to practice self-restraint when you don't actually have to use it very often. Willpower is like a muscle. It gets fatigued throughout the day.
Decision fatigue.
Right. If you are constantly surrounded by temptation, you are asking your brain to fight an exhausting uphill battle all day long. The highly disciplined person isn't fighting the battle and winning. They have arranged their life so the battle doesn't even take place.
Okay, so you aren't losing the fight. You are just fighting in the wrong arena.
I love that frame.
That completely reframes how we should look at our own failures. But if it really is all about the environment, why are our bad habits so incredibly sticky?
That's the million-dollar question.
Even when we want to change, even when we know a habit is bad for us, why does it feel biologically impossible to break once we're caught in the loop? The text talks about this concept that bad habits are autocatalytic.
Yes, autocatalytic.
Which sounds like a term from a chemistry textbook, but it essentially means they feed themselves.
It is a cruel biological joke, honestly. The concept of something being autocatalytic means the process itself produces the catalyst required to keep the process going.
Right.
In terms of human behavior, the bad habit often fosters the exact feelings it is trying to numb. The book provides several highly relatable examples that outline why we get trapped. Let's say you feel stressed or bad about yourself, so you eat some heavy junk food to get a quick hit of comfort and dopamine.
We've all been there.
But because you ate the junk food, you end up feeling sluggish, heavy, and bad about your health. The supposed solution actually becomes the cause of the next problem. You feel bad, so you eat, which makes you feel bad, so you want to eat again.
It's a closed loop, or the classic evening trap. You feel mentally exhausted from work, so you sit down to watch television to unwind.
Just for an hour.
Right, just 1 hour. But watching hours of television makes you feel physically lethargic and unmotivated, so you don't have the energy to get up and do anything productive.
Which leads you to just keep watching more television to avoid the guilt of not doing anything.
Exactly. Or someone worrying about their declining health gets anxious. What's their coping mechanism for anxiety? They smoke a cigarette to ease the nerves.
And that cigarette directly makes their health worse.
Which in turn makes them more anxious about their health. It is a terrifying downward spiral. A runaway train.
And the engine powering that runaway train is what behavioral researchers call cue-induced wanting.
Okay, before we go deeper into that, let's make sure we clearly define what a cue actually is in this context. We throw the word around, but for the sake of our listener, a cue can be almost anything, right?
Almost anything, yes.
It could be a specific smell, a time of day, a visual trigger like seeing a notification badge on your phone.
Oh, those red badges are powerful cues.
Or even an internal emotional state like boredom or loneliness.
That is a perfect summary. A cue is just a piece of information that predicts a reward. Cue-induced wanting means that noticing one of these external or internal triggers causes a compulsive craving to repeat a bad habit.
It's automatic.
And what is truly terrifying is how quickly, efficiently, and subconsciously this process happens in the brain. The sources reference a neuroscientific study that perfectly illustrates this. Scientists took individuals with a history of cocaine addiction and showed them a picture of cocaine for just 33 milliseconds.
Wait, 33 milliseconds.
33 milliseconds.
That is literally a fraction of a blink. That is completely imperceptible to the conscious mind.
Exactly. It was far too fast for the conscious prefrontal cortex, the logical thinking part of the brain, to even register what it had seen. If you asked the subjects what they just looked at, they couldn't tell you.
They literally didn't know they saw it.
Right. But when the researchers scanned their brains during this process, the reward pathway, driven by the limbic system, had completely lit up. The amygdala had fired. Desire had been sparked.
Wow.
The craving was initiated chemically before the person even consciously knew what was happening. By the time your logical brain realizes you are looking at a temptation, your biological systems are already screaming for it. Once you notice something, even subconsciously, you begin to want it.
That is so powerful because it highlights that we are fighting against a deeply ingrained biological machine that is moving faster than our conscious thoughts.
Much faster.
It really emphasizes that once the mental grooves of a habit are carved into your brain, they are almost impossible to erase entirely.
Yeah.
And there's a specific story in the notes that brings this scientific concept down to a very human level. It's the story of Patty Alwell.
Oh, yes. The horseback riding story.
Right. She was a therapist living in Austin, Texas. Years ago, she was a smoker, and she had a specific routine. She would often light up a cigarette while she was out horseback riding with a friend. Eventually, she decided to quit smoking, and she was successful. She avoided cigarettes for years.
Good for her.
Yeah. And around the exact same time, she also happened to stop riding horses. Decades pass. We were talking decades.
A lifetime, really.
Then, one day, she decides to hop on a horse again for a ride, and instantly, after all those years, she found herself craving a cigarette.
Because the brain is an incredibly efficient prediction machine, the environmental cues were still deeply internalized in her brain. They just hadn't been triggered in a long time.
It was lying dormant.
Exactly. Her brain had intricately linked the physical sensation of sitting on a leather saddle, the smell of the outdoors and the dust, the rhythmic motion of the horse's gait. It linked all of that directly to the dopamine hit of nicotine. The conscious desire to smoke was gone, but the biological wiring remained completely intact.
Unbelievable.
The very moment that highly specific environment returned, the craving instantly followed.
Wait, so she hadn't smoked in decades, but simply the physical rhythm of the horse acted as a direct biological trigger. Her brain had kept that dopamine prediction completely dormant all those years, just waiting for the cue.
Just waiting to be activated.
Here's where it gets really interesting, especially when we think about how society tries to help people break bad habits. Because we don't fully understand how these biological cues work, our traditional behavior change techniques can actually backfire spectacularly.
They absolutely can.
Take public health anti-smoking campaigns, for example. What do we typically do to get people to stop smoking? We put up billboards showing horrifying pictures of blackened lungs.
Right.
We run commercials with people breathing through tubes. We try to use pure logic to scare them straight.
Which seems perfectly logical on the surface. You want to clearly demonstrate the negative consequences to discourage the action. But consider what that actually does to the neurological state of a smoker. Seeing those blackened lungs causes an immediate spike in fear and anxiety.
The stress goes up.
The amygdala goes into overdrive. And what is the smoker's deeply ingrained, chemically automated coping mechanism for dealing with any form of anxiety or stress?
Reaching for a cigarette.
Reaching for a cigarette. By trying to scare them, the campaign is actively triggering the exact emotional cue that drives the very behavior they want to stop.
That is wild.
The same paradox applies to shaming people about their weight. If you make someone feel stressed, guilty, and terrible about their body, they are very likely to return to their favorite coping strategy to numb that bad feeling.
Which might be overeating.
Exactly. If you aren't incredibly careful about the cues you are broadcasting, you cause the exact behavior you are desperately trying to prevent.
It is such a trap. We are out here trying to fight our own biology with logic, and biology wins every single time.
It has a 33 millisecond head start.
Right. Resisting temptation is an incredibly ineffective long-term strategy because it takes entirely too much metabolic energy. Self-control is a short-term fix.
Very short term.
You might be able to summon the willpower to resist the donut sitting in the office break room once, maybe twice.
Sure.
But if your desk is right next to the break room and you have to walk past that donut 20 times a day, eventually your decision fatigue sets in. Your willpower depletes, and you will eat the donut.
It's inevitable.
So what does this all mean? If heroic willpower is a myth, if our brains are secretly hijacking our desires before we can even blink, and if traditional guilt trips just make it worse, how on earth do you actually fix your bad habits?
This brings us to the absolute core concept of Chapter 7, and it represents a massive paradigm shift in how we approach self-improvement.
I'm ready.
The solution lies in what James Clear calls the inversion of the first law of behavior change. In his framework, the first law of building a good habit is to make it obvious.
Right. Put the running shoes by the door.
Exactly. Therefore, if you want to break a bad habit, you must execute the inversion, make it invisible.
Make it invisible. It sounds beautifully simple, almost too simple.
It is simple in theory, but it is profoundly effective in practice because it aligns with our biology rather than fighting it. Since we know definitively that habits are triggered by cues in our environment, the most reliable, energy-efficient approach is to cut the bad habit off at the source.
Just remove the cue entirely.
You have to radically reduce your exposure to the cue that causes the craving. Instead of constantly summoning a new dose of willpower every time you face a temptation, you need to spend your energy up front,
Setting up the environment.
optimizing your environment so the temptation simply isn't there to trigger you in the first place.
Let's get really practical with this for the listener, because the sources are packed with rapid-fire, real-world applications of this make it invisible strategy that you can use literally today.
Let's do it.
Let's start with focus. Let's say you sit down at your desk. You really need to get some deep work done, but you can't seem to focus. You keep picking up your phone.
A very modern problem.
The traditional willpower approach is to put the phone face down on the desk and actively tell yourself, I am not going to touch it.
Which doesn't work.
No, because the phone is still in your visual field. It's radiating a phantom buzz. You are burning energy just ignoring it.
Right.
The make it invisible approach. You take the phone, you walk into another room, and you leave it there for 2 hours.
Yes. And you will feel a tremendous amount of psychological friction when you first try to do that. Your brain will panic slightly because you are separating from the potential reward.
It feels wrong at first.
But once it is out of the room, if the phone isn't in your visual field, the trigger to check it simply never fires. The craving dies on the vine.
Let's take another common issue that plagues so many people today. Say you were continually feeling like you're not enough. You have this low-level anxiety and envy about your lifestyle, your body, or your career.
Social media is a huge driver for this.
Huge. And the willpower approach is to try and practice daily gratitude while continuing to scroll through perfectly curated social media feeds filled with fitness models and billionaires.
You're fighting a losing battle.
The make it invisible approach is to systematically go through and stop following the social media accounts that trigger that specific jealousy. Curate your digital feed so the cue for envy is removed entirely.
Exactly. You aren't trying to become a more enlightened person who is immune to jealousy. You are just removing the thing that makes you jealous.
Yes. Or what if you feel like you are wasting way too much time watching television every single night? You tell yourself you're only going to watch one episode to wind down.
But then the autoplay kicks in.
The autoplay countdown kicks in, the screen flashes, and 3 hours later you are still on the couch feeling terrible about yourself.
We've all done it.
The solution isn't to try and negotiate with the remote control or practice better self-discipline when the next episode starts. You just physically move the television entirely out of your bedroom or even out of the main living space. Make the TV invisible.
It sounds extreme to move a piece of furniture, but that is the level of environmental design required. Another great example from the text applies to gaming or impulse buying.
Okay, let's hear it.
If you feel like you are spending too much money on electronics, the answer isn't to stare at a strict, balanced budget spreadsheet while simultaneously browsing a tech store's website.
That's just torture.
It is. The answer is to unsubscribe from the promotional newsletters entirely and quit reading reviews of the latest tech gear. If you are playing too many video games and it's ruining your productivity, don't just turn off the console with the controller.
What do you do instead?
Physically unplug the console from the wall, unplug the HDMI cable, wrap up all the cords, and put the entire system in a closet after every single use.
Oh, wow. That adds so much physical friction. I can just imagine the annoyance of having to set that up.
That's the point.
If you really want to play a game, you have to want it enough to go to the closet, unpack it, untangle the cords, plug it into the wall, and hook it up to the TV. You are making the bad habit invisible, And by doing so, you are making it incredibly annoying to access.
Yes. You aren't changing your desire to play, you are changing the environment so that the lazy default is to not play.
That is brilliant.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what we are really talking about is a fundamental shift in identity. It is the shift from being a passive victim of your surroundings to becoming the active architect of them.
Architect over victim. I like that.
A lot of us just blindly accept the environments we find ourselves in. We accept the default layout of our living rooms, the default notification settings on our smartphones, the default junk food our partner buys for the pantry.
We let the world build the cues for us.
Precisely. But your precious mental energy shouldn't be spent trying to overpower those defaults with sheer force of will. Your energy should be spent actively designing the spaces you live and work in. Remove a single negative cue, make it invisible, and very often, the entire deeply ingrained habit structure that was built on top of it simply fades away.
That is incredibly empowering. It takes the heavy, guilt-ridden burden of being a better person completely off your shoulders and replaces it with the highly actionable task of building a better room.
Well said.
So to wrap up all the core takeaways for you listening today, if you are currently struggling with a bad habit, whether it is snacking, scrolling, or smoking, you aren't fundamentally weak and you don't lack discipline.
Not at all.
Society has sold you a lie about heroic willpower. The truth is, your brain is just doing exactly what it evolved to do. It is reacting to the cues around you, sometimes in mere fractions of a second, entirely bypassing your conscious control.
You don't need to fight your own biology.
Right. You just need to become the architect of your environment. Detail the core concept of Chapter 7 in your own life using simple, actionable language. Make the cues of your bad habits completely invisible. Put the phone in the other room. Unplug the TV from the wall. Unfollow the toxic accounts.
Exactly. Don't rely on being better, rely on a better environment. But this raises an important question, something for you to really chew on after we wrap up here today.
Let's hear it.
If our environments dictate our behavior, our cravings, and ultimately our daily habits so powerfully, how much of your actual identity is genuinely you?
Well, that's deep.
And how much of your personality is just a product of the rooms you happen to spend the most time in? If you were to completely change the physical layout, the visual cues, and the friction points of every single room you interact with on a daily basis, would you eventually become an entirely different person?
Wow. That is quite the thought to end on. Who are we, really, without our cues? Are we just a reflection of our living rooms?
It's something to think about.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material today. We hope you take a moment right now, wherever you are, to just take a look around your own room. Look at your desk, your phone, your kitchen counters.
See what's there.
See what invisible cues might be secretly driving your day, and maybe, just maybe, start rearranging the furniture of your life. Until next time, keep diving deep.